there this winter. I observed squats of either the artistic or political variety, both kinds, in every stage of their sort of existence. Tomas mentioned groups that are very media savvy and use the squat as a political tool. One of these is Judy Noir, and I spent a lot of time with this group, accompanying them on a couple of break-ins to buildings that they hope to squat. I visited many other squats, some of them institutionalized, which is to say under contract with the city government, as Tomas described, some of them not. I lived for a week at an artistic squat, which was a very old squat, about 10 years old, which was currently facing the prospect of a January 7th eviction order by the mayor, and wondering whether or not the mayor would follow through on this eviction order, because sometimes he does not, and turns instead a blind eye to squats that have a particular level of longevity and also of contribution to the social and cultural life of the community. So I'm a lot newer at this than the other researchers, but I have some fresh and colorful memories that I'm happy to share.
Can I ask you something? Did you go to, so I understand that there's these different squads with different groups of people. They're almost like segregated by, in a way, right? So did you always like people from immigrating squad? Is that what you call it? How was that like?
What's the relationship between?
Yeah, how would you describe a squad that is people that are immigrated?
How can I describe it? Yeah, the immigrants by themselves, you have different, the North African immigrant, for example, they organize a kind of network with this association, which is very famous in France. And so when they arrive, they are organized and they can find buildings to live and to survive.
Also, the association is what provides buildings for the people to go and squat.
Yeah. But at the same time, you have other kind of immigrants, for example, coming from the Eastern Europe, and they are not in this kind of network of squatting movements, and so they squat land and not building, because land is easier in France, and so you have also squat of land. And so you have different network, and they don't have relation. It's not something. But you have, maybe you can add something. In the east of Paris, you have a city where you have some collaboration between activists and these Roma people, for example, etc. They tried, for example, to squat building for them. So we have some collaboration, but not so much. Maybe you can.
Yeah, I was thinking about. I'm Adrien from France. I come from Paris, too, but more precisely from the eastern suburb called Montreuil, which is a small town and where there's houses. And there's a lot, like Montreuil is sometimes called the second city in Mali after Bamako. There's a lot of migrants from Mali, a lot of Romani people, so it's a bit of a really mixed city. Well, it's, as he said, there's many different realities and many different stories. So I will basically speak of the one I know the most, which is big. I will speak just of different things that maybe don't speak every day between themselves, but which are sometimes in any way linked. I belong to a community in Montreuil of activists, and we try to mutualize our needs of housing, of taking care of children, for food, for everything. So we just get to some mutual hate and try to fight against mostly eviction housing, for Romani people, for us, for immigrant people that we might have been squatting with or not, which can be pretty mixed. But right now we are facing some problems because it's been years we were squatting there, opening houses, sometimes some big ones, really public in the downtown, sometimes some small ones just for living, or it just depends. But what happens is that the city council start to say, like 3 weeks ago we tried to open a house, and the city council evicted it. Like basically, they just come with big, with force, and they just get you out because they say we are political squats, so we don't have to stay here. She does the petition saying that there's political of poor people and there's political squats, so we need to get the political squats out, which is a bit of a lie, I must say. But we are faced with this problem, which is also the one in France the state has built the category of anarcho-autonomist, and so the police is really, like they sometimes treat us like terrorists, so there's big means to evict us, and it can be a pretty problem, and moreover, for different reasons, a bit too long to explain right now, but it's like it was said in Italy, we wanted to break the ghetto, to get out, and sometimes getting a bit sick with squatting. Sick, I belong to explain, but just sometimes sick of forced ghetto. And second, like the city in Montreuil and in Paris also, but in Montreuil it's really urban projects everywhere. So the city is changing quick, fast. Every building is getting changed sometimes. So you need to organize against that. And sometimes squatted houses were not the right space to do it. It was getting too complicated or maybe too short time because we were evicted and you get sick of that and you get children and you can't go on like that. You need some spaces. So, I'll just say, in a lot of cities in France, for like the radical activist area, a lot of people, there's still some squats opening, some houses, but it's getting a bit less, because a lot of people try to find other spaces of organizations in different cities, which by people who didn't necessarily coordinate themselves, but there's many libraries that have opened, like people renting the place and doing like an alternative library in it, doing some discussions, moving projections, and trying to diffuse political books and organize that stuff. You have some people that have actually bought and opened some restaurants in different cities of France, even if they don't coordinate, but just it happened in a lot of different cities. You have a place in Rennes, in Brittany, that opened House of Strike. They're renting it. It's a big building. It's called House of Strike because it was born last year, or maybe 2 years now, during the movement in France against the reform of not get paid after working. Yeah, in October there was a big movement in France, and we collected money and we squatted a house with syndicates. A lot of people taking part in this movement. So after it was evicted, but the idea kept on. So in the end, they opened the house called the House of Strike, which can be like a social center. We want to do shows there, we want to organize, but to organize in a way that syndicates and other parts of the civil life or whatever groups can participate too. Just to finish, you have like on a large level, you have the economic crisis and all the debt discourse in the government that then you're under debt, you need to pay back. And we try to fight against that and to get just places of organizations in the city, but not necessarily by squatting, but we try to find other ways. And just by the way to finish, I'm here for 2 months, so I'll be glad to meet and speak with anyone from here to get information. So I'm supposed to take as much as I can back home, so my mates. And I finished with the sentence. In the center of France, you have also a place called Tarnac, with people that were accused of writing the coming insurrection. And basically here, there's a lot of people living here as they try to organize like a multi-year organization getting really strong, and you get like a lot of people come there and getting many needs self-managed, and still keeping on the political organization.
Yes, we're having a social event afterwards. Again, I remind you of the Clementi Sotovalez. But we have to end sharp at 7 because they're coming. No problem. Also, when he mentions syndicats, this is unions.
I was asking Tina also to talk a little bit about Denmark, but maybe she needs to think a little bit more about it. But maybe we can move to England. And Nathan, please, also a researcher on squatting and an activist.
So yeah, I'm Nathan. I'm from Bristol, southwest of England. I've just been asked to do this, so if there's other people with experience of the UK squats and autonomous spaces, then please do chip in. And if people can't hear me, then please shout and kind of speak into behind as well. So squatting in the UK started, well, you could arguably talk about the 1650s with the diggers occupying land, but we don't really need to go back that far. If we're talking about squatting buildings, then we generally think Cowley was a soldier who came back from the Second World War, and there was a huge amount of houses that had been bombed, and there was a huge amount of people in need of housing, and a lot of those were veterans. And so him and a group of other people occupied predominantly military barracks, because those were obviously because housing was in short supply, but there were military barracks that were then empty, so they were then occupied by families. So that was quite hard for the state to resist in a way, because it was because of the kind of because it's veterans and it was about the war and it was families and it was, you know, it was seen in quite a good light, and eventually that all those families were rehoused. And then kind of squatting as we know it sort of re-emerged more in the 60s, you know, with 60s counterculture. And yeah, developed through the 70s and 80s really. And in the UK, trespass has been a civil offence. And so, to put it quite simply, there's this kind of misnomer that in the UK there's squatters' rights. You don't really have any rights. It's more that the landlord, if I live in my house and I own my house, and you come outside my house and phone the police and say, this guy Nate's in my house, get him out, he's squatting my house, and it's actually mine. The police can't come along and just kick someone out of the house just on hearsay. They have to take. It's like, right, who owns the house? Who's got possession? Who can prove possession in a court of law? Okay, you've got possession, you get kicked out. So it basically means there's a period of time where if you are in possession, the person who's outside, who's probably the landlord, has to prove that it's theirs to get you out. And so that's the only right that you have, that they can take it to court. There have just been changes in the law to criminalise squatting, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So, unlike say Italy, France, Spain, it's predominantly housing, like small houses that are squatted. Yes, in the 90s, with the kind of ecological direct action, there was a lot more political squats, particularly on sites of roads or on, it was predominantly around roads, but there were land and housing squats that had a more sort of explicit social, political, obviously everyone's political, but more explicit social, political intention. And with the Criminal Justice Act in the 90s, a lot of that was cracked down on. So again, but in the late 90s, we did begin to see the emergence of social centres, and some of that was kind of, late 90s, early 2000s, as critiques of kind of so-called summit hopping started to come out, and people saying, okay, we're coming together around all this stuff, but we need to do forms of action that are more locally situated, that are more long-term, that are more personally sustainable, that are more sustainable in our community, however we conceptualise what community is. And so, people did look to mainland Europe, to the social centre model. And so, Cabelli in Bristol was squatted in '94, around that time, and it's a social centre. It's now owned. When they went to court, and during the court, they resisted eviction. They lost the court for the first time, resisted eviction, and then in successive kind of wranglings with the owners, said, can we form a can you give us enough time to form a co-op? If we can form a co-op and get the money together. So I mean, I think it's interesting as well to look at how squatting, I mean, as Hans mentioned, how it can open other possibilities for possibly autonomous spaces that aren't necessarily squatted. So as not to just completely fixate on that. So yeah, social centres, a lot of housing. I suppose the next big thing that's happened in the last 5 years has been, I don't know if people may be aware that 2008 there was an international call out in defence of squats and autonomous spaces for a few days of action in April 2008. Well, the call out came out in 2007, but that, in the UK at least, did initiate